Why should somebody who maybe had an ancestor 7 or 8 generations ago, long before they were a twinkle in their great-great-great-great-grandparents' eye, why should they have to pay now for what an ancient
the family? How do you want them to
I think exactly what we've been saying, that they must see reparation as an important aspect of national life against humankind.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In case you're new here, my name is Maren. And I'm Maureen. So after the UN vote to recognize slavery as a human rights violation, one thing that has been going very viral this week was an interview that was done by the Guyanese president back in 2023, and he was addressing the very same issue. Right, and the main questions you're going to be asking in today's episode, or rather, the interviewer is going to be asking the Guyanese president is, should reparations be forced to be paid by the current administrations existing? And number two, how would that happen in today's world? Both of which he managed to answer. Question is, are these people ready to pay reparations, or at the very least to acknowledge that whatever happened to black people was something that was bad and it was a crime against humanity? Are they ready to admit this? Right, because when it comes to Guyana, they are demanding reparations from the British government, and the British government was one of the governments that abstained from voting in the UN just last week. So guys, let's watch this interview and then we come back and talk about it. But definitely let us know what you think about this same interview, and also consider subscribing if you're new to our channel. Let's watch and then we back. This interview just goes to show how countries that were involved in slavery like to meander around the topic and don't really like to go through it. For all of them to have similar, if not the same kind of responses when it comes to people who are demanding justice and reparations, it means that at some point in life, the ruling class, they sat down and knew exactly what they were doing. They knew it was wrong, and hence most of them decided to meander around this topic, because most of them know that if they acknowledge that slavery was indeed a human rights violation, it also means it will accompany them having been forced to pay reparations. Right, and guys, the disrespectful thing about this interview was how towards the end, the interviewer was asking, this is a whole president you're talking to. I'm very sure if it was Donald Trump, you wouldn't have spoken to him in that manner. If it was Prince William, you wouldn't have spoken to him in that manner. So I'm wondering what gave him the audacity to even make a joke like that and ask the Guyanese president, what do they want as reparation? Do they want the palace? For goodness sake, even if it was a joke, you can't take such things lightly, because this is a serious topic we are talking about. And for you to go and joke about, like, what can a palace, a mere palace, do to a whole entire population of black people who are wronged, you know? Right, it's not that like even if they gave Guyana the palace, the whole of Guyanese would fit into that palace, number one. And number two, this very disrespectful question came right after the Guyanese president had finished listing how reparations would be calculated and hence paid. So this means that either this interviewer had a block between his ears and wasn't listening at all, or he completely disregarded the system in which the Guyanese president was suggesting for people to use in terms of paying other people reparations, right? And I do really like the question, the answer he gave on how reparations would be calculated. And he said, let me just repeat them. Number one, that they would have to calculate the time of value of money right now, right? And number two, they would have to calculate in regard to the period slavery took place, right? And number three, he said they would have to calculate the extraction of wealth and how it was utilized to build the countries, the first world countries right now. So I do feel like those three measures he gave are very accurate, because even I didn't know how reparations could be paid when it came time to, if the countries would have agreed to pay reparations, how they would go about it. But I think the Guyanese president gave a very, very good way in which countries can pay reparation to their black communities. Right, and on the very same note, you keep on asking, should people be forced to be, should countries or governments be forced to pay reparation? And the question I'm going to ask after that is, are they still enjoying the benefits of ripping off countries? Even in Africa right now, come to Africa and walk around, you'll still see colonizers colonizers' names on streets, rivers, important natural resources,
Not only that, also big companies in Kenya and the rest of Africa. There is a place called, I don't know if it is Mombasa Road or industrial area here in Kenya. When you pass through that road, you see a lot of big companies that have very old British names of not companies but families that own those companies. And when you trace those companies very well, they were established here in Kenya in the colonial era. So meaning those families in Britain are still enjoying the benefits of colonization from Kenya.
Right. So if you're asking why they should be forced to pay, I feel like that question you can answer it yourself. Are you still enjoying the benefits of slavery? Are you still enjoying the systems that were built by your ancestor? Are you still are the people who were on the suffering end going through the same treatment, or are they on the end of receiving the injustice that their ancestors were receiving? If the answer is yes to all of the questions, then you definitely need to pay reparations.
Right, and they've also seen a trend where white people like justifying slavery and what it meant to indentured slavery, which was being practiced before the real slavery happened, right? And I had to Google the meaning of indentured slavery, and this is what Google said for those who don't know, right? Indentured servitude was a system of forced labor where individuals signed a contract, right, to work with wages for a set period, without wages for a set period of time, usually 4 to 7 years, in exchange of passage to a new country, in exchange of food, in exchange of housing, and of something else like freedom dues. Okay, freedom dues like land, right? So indentured servitude is not the same as slavery. And when slavery happened, even here in Africa, there was slavery before the transatlantic slavery, right? And this slavery was in form of not countries but communities, tribes, conquering other tribes, taking those people who were survivors as their servants, right? And then when white people came, they started exchanging these prisoners of war as slaves for money or for spoils or for guns, right? Because white people were the ones who introduced guns to these communities and to these tribes. And furthermore, they caused a further division using these guns, right? And for the communities that didn't have guns, and that even them started doing the slave trade, right? But where things went wrong was when white people started stealing even people from the very same tribes that they were doing trade with and forcing them into slavery. And so they turned this whole system into something else. And this is why right now there is that confusion between how white people did slavery and how slavery was done before the transatlantic slave trade.
Right. And when you talk about 40 acres and a mule, and then you cross-reference that to what the Guyanese president was saying, the reason why the American government does not always like to give Black Americans what they are due, because the ancestors were promised 40 acres and a mule, and then they just yanked it out. So if in today's society you calculated 40 acres and a mule, that's a lot of money they are really owing Black Americans. And this is the reason why they normally fear Black Americans getting into positions of power, because if a lot of them become powerful, then it means they're going to hold to account the white people for what they're enjoying, for what their ancestors did, And so I asked, because this question of reparations seems so ambiguous, and you're like, it's not the first time people are being paid reparations, because the Jews got their reparations. So how did that happen, right? So I was curious and I asked ChatGTP, how were Jews paid reparations? Because I feel like it's important for us to know, because it's the same thing with the Black Americans and what they're asking, reasonable demands. After World War II and the Holocaust, reparations to Jew survivors were paid mainly by West Germany and later unified Germany through a mix of direct payment
payment, services, and restitution of property. That about sounds right. But again, as I said from a previous episode, if America was to do this very same thing that Germany did to restore their relationship with Jewish people, it would mean they would have to treat Black Americans as equals. Because you tell me restoration of property, what does that mean? It means they would be forced to change some policies that they deliberately made in order to subjugate Black Americans, you know. So here is how it worked. Number one, direct payments to survivors. In 1952, West Germany signed the Luxembourg Agreement, with Israel and Jewish organizations. Individual survivors received monthly pensions or one-time payments. Payments were based on factors like, for example, right, time spent in concentration camps.
That in slavery would be time spent in slavery.
Right? Injuries or trauma suffered or loss of livelihood. And when you start calculating payments to Black American survivors or descendants of slaves in America, then it means the American government would go bankrupt trying to even, pay for what they did to the Black American community,
Just a prime example of injuries suffered by the Black American community is just for gynecology to be what it is right now. There is one story of a slave woman, actually 3 slave women, who were used as an experimental stepping stone for white men to know how to do procedures regarding birth for women.
Right, and when you talk about when they were experimenting to study diseases that were happening, we know of illegal experiments that are normally talked about that was done in the Black American community. How would you compensate the descendants of those people that were afflicted by that, action?
And also, when it comes to the slavery, the slaves who were running away, and they were given this name, I don't remember it. What was the name of the disease? They say the slaves who were running away were usually suffered. It was a mental disease, right? For someone who was
invented.
Yeah, they invented. So for these mental diseases, they also had their own mental ways of curing these people. And you cannot imagine how the cruelty or just the cruelty it implicated for them to cure these people who are trying to run away. So they'd also have to pay for that,
Right.
So there's a lot of evidence when it comes to the Black American community, what their ancestors suffered and the traumas that Black Americans still have to live with till today.
Right. So how Jews were paid reparations, another way was through payments to Israel. Because many survivors resettled there, Israel received large-scale reparations, about 3 billion Deutschmarks over a decade, used to build infrastructure, housing, public services. This helped stabilize Israel's economy.
And that is the biggest thing when it comes to Black American community, or even any other Caribbean country or any other country that was affected because of slavery. That is the biggest thing these countries don't want, because right now the only thing they have advantage over all these Black or melanated countries and Black American community is the fact that they are above all these melanated people. But if they start supporting their growth financially, they themselves know that Black Americans and any other melanated people or community will start leading them instead of them leading the Black American communities. And according to them, they usually say melanated people deserve to be slaved and deserve to be ruled because they don't have a thinking brain of their own.
Right. So the third way was compensation through Jewish organizations. The Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, often called the Claims Conference, was created to negotiate and distribute funds. Represented Jewish victims worldwide, continues to distribute compensation today, funds welfare programs for elderly survivors. So you see all these ways through which, and even today, compensation is still going on for the Jewish families that were affected, right?
And that is rightfully so, because also what happened to them wasn't
light.
My thing is, I just wonder how you can recognize that situation and fail to recognize slavery, being that slavery was equally cruel.
Right, and how they're still making ongoing payments today is through So reparations didn't stop decades ago. Germany still funds healthcare for survivors, social support programs, payments continue, especially for elderly and vulnerable survivors, you know. So that was Germany taking accountability for what it did to the Jewish community. So right now, what America is fearing is acknowledging the fact that they wronged Black Americans.
And, America, Britain, and the countries that participated in either slavery or colonization.
Right, because the moment they acknowledge this, it means they have to be spending huge lump sum of money to support these descendants and to rebuild their relationship with the people they've acknowledged to have harmed. And Prince Charles, when he was coming into power, he traveled to Africa, Kenya to be specific, because Kenya was such a, you know, hotspot hub.
And it was not only that, but it was an era where West Africa was cutting ties with their colonial master, which was France.
Right.
So when he took power, he also wanted to re-establish his ties to Kenya, right? And Kenyan Gen Zs were saying that it's
No
actually
apology,
time,
no
no apology,
visit.
no visit. It was time for Kenya to stand on its own and do the same thing that West Africa was doing. And that is what the administration in Europe was afraid of. The British administration in Europe was afraid of. And that's how he came to Kenya. But when he came to Kenya, he never actually apologized. I think
Although
just
those were
about
demands, the demands that Gen Zs were making in our
and
country.
millennials. Yeah, so I think he would just about acknowledge that what they did was, well, he didn't say wrong, but you know, they just circumnavigated the issue as all the countries usually do. So guys, let us know what you think about this episode, and also consider subscribing if you're new to our channel, and we'll see you on our next episode.